you will probably be able to relate that I've spent 20 years perfecting my instrumental techniques so I can finally become perfectly replaceable. 2005, I stood backstage in Tokyo, violin in hand. When you are a violinist, every performance can be like an audition. You have to prove your worth among thousands of other technically flawless players. A reflection of myself in the mirror, right before you walk on stage, have shown what everyone has seen. Just another violinist without anything special to say. But you know this is not true. You know that you have something very special to express. This is why you became a musician. Here's the truth. Technical perfection, prestigious instruments, phenomenal CVs, all that became just the price of the entrance ticket, not an invitation to the table. And it was in this moment I had to face the question I have avoided for so long. Will I remain the option number 97 on the list of options, always hanging around, but never invited to sit? And indeed, that was my last performance. They found a replacement. I don't know if the replacement was 2% better than I was, but surely the replacement never asked any questions. This is when I turned to the Violoncello da Spalla, the instrument I've made earlier that year. Not just an instrument, a forgotten opportunity. And musicians around, they just laughed. Who needs that? And indeed, I didn't expect. The results have exceeded any expectations. All of a sudden, the journalist who would not come to my performances as a violinist and would never return my call started scheduling interviews with me to share my story with their readers. I got featured on major news, major industry magazines such as Sarasate, The String, The Strat, radio, television, and in less than a year I was performing at major venues such as Tokyo Opera City as Violoncello da Spalla soloist. Festival organizers from Asia, from Europe, from Latin America started inviting me to perform as Violoncello da Spalla player. Chamber ensembles offered me featured positions as a Violoncello da Spalla soloist. So what happened? My technique didn't become better. Music was the same. But one of the audience members, a lady, approached and she said, no other musician says that story, and many people see themselves as the heroes in that story. And if this was just my case, I would not be even talking today to you. While other musicians kept mocking, I have been building these instruments for musicians from all around the world, and many of them experienced the same transformation. One of my clients, j.s.bach, said, my God, this instrument is like coming home. Just like this instrument is a true, confident companion to yourself. And as a result of this life experience, I have discovered a paradox. Technical mastery can actually be a trap. The better you do what countless others are doing so well, the less anyone seems to notice you. Trying to be 5% better than others is very hard to achieve because the level is very high. And even then, it is rarely meaningful. It really matters. Whereas being meaningfully different always does. I've discovered that sound is not just what you hear, sound is what you become. So before you spend another hour practicing your instruments, perfecting your techniques, ask yourself a very simple question. What would make me impossible to replace? This is not about instrument. It's not about violoncello da Spalla. It's not about techniques, how to play violoncello da Spalla. This is about hopefully helping you to find that thing that will make you remarkable. And the good news is that in the course of the past 20 years, the roadmap has been quite designed. And here it is, the sound alchemy. 4 petals with you in the center. Today, we do not have the time to cover all 5 parts. We will focus just on you, which stands for universality. What do I mean by universality? By universality, I mean that you, as cello, violin, viola players, already have 90% or more of the technique you will ever need to play the violoncello da Spalla. And in a moment, we will dive into the nitty-gritty of today's workshop, so you can actually all try this technique with the violoncello da Spalla here. I will also show you how you can try this technique at home using your violins or viola, so you can get really familiar. And if you find that it is your thing, be ready for stage in a matter of days, maybe weeks, but definitely not months or years or never. However, before we begin, I would like to invite on stage a very dear friend of mine, Arno. Thank you, Arno. So I invited Arno to play with me. And why I invited Arno is because, firstly, it was very hard to find another Spalla player in the Netherlands. Probably there is none. And secondly, Arno is an author, is a speaker in demand. He's not a musician. He's an amateur musician, but he's not a professional musician. And I believe that is what makes him the ideal person to come here and to illustrate the point, just how much you can achieve after just 20 minutes of focused practice on all those things that we are going to actually cover today.
Yeah. And Dmitry doesn't tell you that I've only had my Spalla for like 3 months. So
I also forgot to mention that Arno actually crafted his Spalla.
What instrument did you play?
So I play violin and viola, but violin primarily. Yeah. And I've been an amateur musician for ages. So when I moved to the Netherlands in 2009, I found a wonderful teacher, and I was with her for 10 years, and then she retired. So I was very sad about that. But you know, your musical teacher is becomes like a musical mom. So I was very sad when she retired. But yeah, I played violin, and then many years ago, I wanted a better violin, and so I found Dmitry offering violin making lessons. And so I thought, well, isn't that the perfect thing for an amateur violinist to make his own instrument? And that was 12 years ago. And so when I met Dmitry, he was making a Spalla. And I made a violin, and then I made another violin, and then I made a viola. And then he's like, why don't you make a Spalla? And I was like, Spalla? Me? You know? Yeah, here I am. Now I've got a Spalla. waiting for the aeroplane like you normally do. And I saw this little kid with a Rubik's Cube. And he was like 10, 11. Done. And then he does it again. I'm like, this little kid is showing off. And the thought that went through my head is, if that kid can do it, then surely I can do it. And of course, I bought a Rubik's Cube, and it was much harder than I thought. But indeed, with a bit of persistence and practice, I finally got it. So hopefully that story gives you a sense maybe of what you're experiencing now. Like, if I can do it, then surely you all could too.